Hi everybody, Scott here. In this video I'm going to talk about INFJs and dealing with narcissism or narcissists. Now this video can apply to really anybody. Not only the INFJs have to deal with this personality type. I think NFs can be susceptible to this dynamic with finding themselves in some kind of relationship with a narcissist, mainly because of the empathy. Narcissists tend to be drawn to empathy because that empathy is essentially a way that they get a tremendous amount of attention. Now there is a bit of an overlap when it comes to narcissism and borderline personality disorder. And if you look at a lot of the narcissistic traits, it's really about sort of that whole sort of self-centeredness, and it's sort of focused around that sort of pathological self-absorption, whereas borderline personality is more characterized by those extreme emotions, the fear of attachment, the wanting attachment but then pulling away from attachment. In a really, it can look incredibly sort of not aggressive's not the right word. Really intense, super intense. And not a pleasant experience to be on the receiving end of. This video is going to overlap a little bit, I think. I think some of the dynamics, some of the traits could overlap between narcissism and borderline personality. And I would even say, more sort of some sociopath type traits, because there is a tendency sometimes that, there's a sense that sometimes it feels like narcissists know what they're doing, whereas some of the readings suggest that they don't. They're just being themselves, and that's true, and that that it's not from a sinister or premeditated place. And I think that does characterize narcissists. But there is a sense sometimes, and just talk to people, that sometimes there can be a sense that there's something intentional about the narcissist's abuse. In fact, even enjoying it. So there's kind of this there can be kind of this combination: narcissism, borderline personality disorder, sort of sociopathy, and so this video might kind of touch on all three as I go along. The narcissist are characterized by some kind of attachment trauma in childhood that leads to this kind of being stuck in this self-centered ego state of the world revolving around them. They only see their own needs and what they want. They're incapable of or empathy and being able to put themselves in other people's shoes, sense what others want. They do learn how to, very well I should say, work their way into society and so on. And so this is a very heavy topic. Some of you watching might have been through tremendous amounts of pain dealing with this personality, with this disorder, and only you know what I mean when I say tremendous amounts of pain. There is something diabolical about dealing with this when it's in its extreme. So this video is an attempt to describe what sets up this dynamic between the empath and the narcissist, looking at it from an INFJ perspective, but empaths essentially have this problem, can have this problem with narcissists, and not just empaths and INFJs, but like everyone could potentially find themselves in this situation. So one vulnerability that can lead to an INFJ or an empath finding themselves in a narcissistic relationship is growing up in an environment where a caregiver or the caregivers are narcissistic in some way, and the INFJ empath is groomed to take care of and meet only the needs of the parent and not themselves. And so there's this overextending focus pulled out of the INFJ to meet the need of the narcissist, and that pattern and dynamic sets them up to being attracted and being attracted to and attracting a narcissist personality into their lives. There's a lot that could be said about what creates a narcissist, in the sense of why two people could grow up in a similar environment and one becomes a narcissist and the other one becomes an empath that takes care of the narcissist. And one thought that I have on that is that an inborn trait of empathy could be a deciding factor on whether a child grows up to act out the narcissist tendencies that were modeled to them growing up, or if they grow up very sensitive to the needs of others because they were dealing with a narcissist. And that empathy component seems to be like a shield or a safeguard that protects them from sort of developing or disconnecting from themselves, being deeply affected by the attachment and developing narcissism. So you've got this this dynamic where the empath, and I'll say empath from here on in this video to be more inclusive, but essentially when I say empath, I am referring to the INFJ as well. That they have an ability to help other people in very deep, profound, and unique ways. And so the the empath finds meaning in helping people to get in touch with themselves and working stuff out. And the narcissist loves that kind of attention. And so it's almost like the empath picks up that there's a problem in the narcissist. Not that they would ever use that word initially. There's a sense that there's something wrong, and there's a desire to be a supportive role in helping them to work stuff out. But it's an illusion. And I say there's this sort of slight sense, because I don't even think it's conscious, that the empath sees that there's an issue. I think sometimes the narcissist presents themselves to create an illusion that they need help, that they need to work some stuff out. Because the INFJ, the empath believes it, because the narcissist is not being deceptive, they're just being themselves. They are being, so it's like they're not hiding the fact that they are deceiving. They're being themselves, if that makes sense. And so the INFJ doesn't pick up an incongruence or a deception, and so just sees them as a normal person that has some problems, and the INFJ might be a supportive role in helping them to deal with those problems. But essentially it's an illusion, and it is the trap that hooks an empath into this system and into this dynamic. The empath gets involved and quickly gets caught up in a trap. A trap that is never ending. It will never end. The only way it ends is the empath removes themselves from the relationship completely. but that can take an awful amount of pain to get there for some people. One of the deceptions that does take place is that the empath thinks that they're getting deep into the world of the other person in the relationship, especially in those early forming times, days, weeks, months, or whatever. The empath thinks that they're getting into the world of the to the narcissist. But in actual reality, there is like nothing to get deep into. It's like a mirage. It's an illusion, and it is part of the trap. And so the empath thinks they're getting deep into the other. In fact, they're not even scratching the surface, because for the narcissist, that just is unacceptable. The defense mechanism is rock solid concrete. The reality of what is happening is, through this process of the empath thinking they're getting into the world of the other, the narcissist is getting into the world of the empath and starts to figure out what makes them tick, what's their vulnerabilities, and begins the spinning the web. However, the empath is often unaware that this is taking place. Again, it's because the narcissist is kind of being natural in this. So there's no deception, no conscious deception in the narcissist way. In a sense, they're naturally manipulative. So the empath doesn't cue in necessarily straight away that this is taking place, although the empath is very good at picking up deception in people. It's a blind spot with the narcissist. And so the narcissist ends up invading and getting into the depths of the empath and wreaks havoc, while in fact the empath is trying to wholeheartedly and in a sense a loving, helping way, trying to get to understand the narcissist in order to be a support to them. And that is just, in a sense, that encapsulates the hideous nature of all of this. So you could almost say that the narcissist is naturally manipulative, and provided the empath gives them the attention that they want, and I think they even feel that they deserve, and doesn't complain or ask anything of the narcissist, everything is fine. However, it's inevitable that the narcissist is going to do something, and I think it's even part of the dynamic that they create, is that they do something to offend the empath, and the empath seeks to resolve this, address it, and therein lies the problem. The narcissist will resist and react strongly to the empath asking them to look at their behavior or look at what they're doing. And the narcissist will do everything they can to avoid and go nowhere near addressing that. In fact, there is a sense that that is part of, that's where it's kind of like, is it sinister or is it just a natural not natural, but, you know, is it just them being themselves, or is there a sinister nature to it? Because it can seem as though some of the things they do, they enjoy it and get a kick out of it. So the empath is kind of hooked into the relationship through what they perceive is the narcissist bringing themselves. Although the issues that they may use to hook the INFJ in, you know, that may be seeking or manipulating that empathy to come their way, may exist in reality, but there's no desire to address it. They just want the attention. Because in a sense, the attention is the cure for the narcissist. That's all they want. They don't want to address anything. They don't want to open themselves up. To open themselves up is to risk further trauma, is to risk further rejection. So that they are hell-bent on, and in a sense unable to open themselves up. And the empath will double down often in their attempt to empathize, to connect, to understand, further getting hooked into the schema, getting further hooked into an abusive cycle. So the empath, in a sense, their empathy gets hijacked. It gets co-opted and comes under the control of the narcissist. So some evidence that one is in a narcissistic situation is that nothing will ever change, in the sense that the other person that the empath was initially drawn to and seeking to help actualize, you'll get further away from that reality than closer to it. And in fact, the empath's life will begin and continue to deteriorate in a consistent way from that point on. In a sense, from when the system is set up, the empath is going to start to give out more than they naturally should, and the empath essentially begins to deteriorate. The narcissist, in a sense, never changes and is, in a sense, unaffected by this. They just want the attention and someone to feed off. And they're incapable of actually recognizing how much pain they're putting the empath through. They're incapable of it, and in a sense, it seems as though they're not interested. And that's kind of just reiterating that the narcissists just being themselves, in a sense, they're not being sinister, they're just being themselves, versus are they actually enjoying wounding the empath? Some would say that they got a sense that the other was enjoying abusing them. The problem is that the abuse is so cleverly done, and that's why the word diabolical comes into play here. Because the abuse is so mind-bendingly complicated and almost impossible to put one's finger on fully. And the narcissist is so incapable and uninterested in addressing anything that the environment emotionally for the empath gets in, like they feel crazy. They become very distressed. Because their emotions are being dealt some very heavy blows, and it never gets resolved. And there can even be a sense of why it's happening, but an inability to address it, and sometimes it's even hard to address it because it's so confrontational for the empath to really address some of the things that are done to them. Because for the empath to behave in a similar way would be, for the most part, so it's just so out of their realm of reality that to address somebody being so destructive in some respects is so confronting that there could be an avoidance to that. In some ways, in some instances or certain events and so on. Others, there can be a tremendous amount of effort that will go into addressing the offences and the woundings and the manipulations and so on that occur with less than zero outcome. And so this is where that diabolical word comes into play. So often an empath will double down on their giving, will try harder to reach the narcissist, try harder to get connected to them. And because for the empath, they believe that they can help, that they can connect. And it's part of the game, because the narcissist is like, I sow wounding and I hurt this other person, and they give me more attention. They try harder to connect to me. So in a sense, it's kind of a conditioning that the narcissist is like, well, why would I change? I'm getting all the attention I would ever want. So in fact, I get more attention when I insult them, wound them, manipulate them, break down relationships between them and other people, and I'll go into all of that soon. But they essentially double down on wounding the empath, because the empath often responds with more attention. And that's, again, the diabolical nature of this. And that's just something that really needs to be driven home for those that feel like they might be in the midst of something like this, is that essentially nothing will ever work. Now that goes against like some wiring in the empath, because they believe that in a sense that everyone can be reached, everybody can be helped, and so on. And not that they're offended by the fact that they can't reach the narcissist, and not that they see it as a challenge. They just believe that they can do it, and that the other person can do it is probably more the point, that the other person can do it. The problem is a normal person can see this as an opportunity, that somebody is coming alongside them to support them while they deal with their issues. For the narcissist, that is impossible. It will just 99.99% of the time will not happen, because the goal for the narcissist is to get that attention and feed off the empath. That's it. And to the level that the empath stays in it is basically to the level that the narcissist will just keep taking. In a sense, the narcissist will never get rid of the empath unless somebody else comes along that can do a better job. But for the most part, the narcissist will stay because of their own abandonment issue. In a sense, for the empath, if they've got abandonment, then that can be like a common denominator. Both are staying because of their own abandonment issues, but for very different reasons. And often what happens is it's the empath that runs out of steam, just can't do it anymore. They're just so broken by everything that they just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually can't do it anymore. And that is usually the turning point for them. Now, narcissists are, like I said before, naturally manipulative of people and organizations. It's like they can manipulate from a distance and manipulate in kind of big picture ways, and manipulate now, knowing that like in 2 years' time, that manipulation or that offense will pay dividends for them in 2 years' time. It's like it's like pathological, you could almost say evil, in its ability to ruin people and get away with it. And not just get away with it, but be seen as the innocent party. And that's just another reality. Another characteristic that will suggest that you're potentially in a narcissistic relationship is that you, on one level, you feel like you don't exist, yet you are the only one trying to do anything to improve the relationship. So there's this contradiction, dichotomy going on. You don't exist in the relationship on one level because of the resistance and the inability, in a sense, for the narcissist to connect with you and to recognize you as a distinct individual. Part of that is because you aren't a human being, in a sense. You are a resource. You are a battery to be taken from. So it sets up this, and for the empath to feel invisible, to feel like they don't exist in the relationship, is torturous. And part of that torture, to kind of go over it again, leads the empath to reach out more and more to try to get a connection, to resolve the pain, to in a sense resolve their abandonment that they're experiencing from the lack of acknowledgement of their existence from the other. And so there's that going on. You don't exist, but you're the only one in the relationship. And in a sense, it's to the narcissist's advantage to not resolve any issues with the empath, because to resolve the issues is to lose some of that attention, to lose control of the empath. And so issues will most likely be created and never resolved, because it essentially binds the empath more and more and more into the narcissist life. Another characteristic that you may find is that they will have all the rights or all of the control, yet without any responsibility. So it's like, you are responsible, but I have the control. Now, if you can get your mind around that, that is a disaster. When someone is like taking control of everything, but they don't want to be responsible for what they're in control of, in a sense, you're responsible for what they do and the outcomes and everything. You've got real abuse occurring here. So some of the ways that the narcissist gets in or pulls the empath in is very early on in the relationship. The narcissist will infiltrate the empath's life in any way they can. And social media, I think, has become a real key way for the narcissist to gain control over your life. Becoming friends with your friend, and before they've asked permission. So they will start to get the friendships and the follows and all of that of your friends and family, of the empath's friends and family, in order to begin a stranglehold. And the empath might feel uncomfortable about it, and may seek to address it at the early stages. God willing, people see that sort of behavior and get out quickly, but often that's not the case. But that can be a way. I mean, social media is a bit funny. It's kind of normal now. And if you're dealing with a normal person, some of those things are nothing. It could be a little bit of a boundary violation. It could be a bit of a grey area. But when dealing with a narcissist, it is deliberate, and it is a boundary violation, and it's an attempt to gain control over your life. And what that essentially does is, if or when that relationship ends, they still have many hooks in which to hurt you, in which to seek to control you and manipulate you. Another thing that they can do is co-opt unsuspecting family and friends to form coalitions to get alongside the narcissist and isolate and sort of make the empath sort of the identified patient is a term that can be used. Like the empath is the problem. And that can be done in many different ways. But essentially that's the dynamic that can occur. And for the empath, eventually when it's time to get out of this thing, is that they, in a sense, have to get to a point where they're willing to let go of all friends or family that have been co-opted and can't see what's going on as part of their recovery. But, there can be exceptions to that. People come around, but for the most part, there needs to be a cutting off wherever possible to recover. But we'll explore that more soon. Another way that they gain control is they through hurting and offending and manipulating, get the empath to invest heavily into the relationship. Yet they won't invest. They won't invest into it. They're like a closed system. Yet they manipulate the empath to be an open system of resources to feed the narcissist. Another thing that can occur is the empath might feel or get a sense that they're being spoken to by people in ways that are incongruent to who they are, and there's a sense that that's coming somehow through the narcissist's manipulation, getting people to see the empath in a certain light or treat them in a certain way. That can happen so masterfully manipulative and almost undetectable that the empath is seen as kind of crazy if they bring it up. But one of the gifts the empath has is often they're intuitive enough to sense when something's not right, when something's going wrong, and very sensitive to all of that. Yet there's a sense that to kind of bring it up, they're going to look crazy, or they're going to be made to look crazy. Hence, more of that entrapment, more of that control. As time goes by, basically, the empath disintegrates little by little, more and more. That more of who they are is taken from them, and it's almost like the other person, the narcissist has their very essence in their fist. And again, that word diabolical, it is for the empath that is going through this or has been through this, knows exactly what I'm talking about. It is so mind-bendingly painful and disorientating and stressful, all of the above, that seldom is there another type of situation in life that presents such a trying to find the right word, like basically a distressing space. Very, very rarely is there anything more fundamentally soul distressing than the dynamic that I'm describing. Another way that this could be set up, or some of the characteristics, is projection. That the narcissist will have their way of doing something and projecting it onto you and making it out like you're doing it, or that you're that type of person, or making others believe that you're that type of person. And again, that's what leads to just the diabolical nature of this, is how they are so good at projecting their own issues onto the empath. And basically this type of dynamic will continue until the empath is virtually got nothing left on the inside. It will appear to take everything it possibly can out of the empath. And it's when that threshold is reached, which for some people can be not very long, for others it could be years. But the empath will get to a place where it's almost like a moment of enlightened self-interest, where they just know that they can't do this anymore. That it's like the light bulb comes on. This is sickness that I'm involved in here, and that they just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually cannot do it and need to get out. And that is usually the turning point for the empath, although it could also be a very, very challenging time in and of itself. In fact, for some people, depending on their circumstances and all the variables, the getting out and recovering from it all can be as painful as being in it, just because of the way the reality that sets in with how much when the empath realizes how much they have been duped, taken advantage of, and left in the gutter, essentially. While still in the dynamic, there is a hope of restoration. There's a hope that it'll all turn around, but it essentially just doesn't. And it's in the leaving, getting out of that the reality of what they've been in, and the damage that's been done really hits home, and that's devastatingly painful. The good news, however, is that it is ultimately a healing process. Coming into the reality of it is part of the healing process. So part of the dealing with this, for the most part, is totally cutting the narcissist out of your life at whatever point you possibly can. Friendships may need to go. Family relationships may be affected by this. Where you socialize, where you spend your time, friends, all of this stuff could go. Not all of it necessarily, but often the narcissist has got their hooks into so many other people's lives, like they've been setting this up for years, so that if you did leave, they will maintain control. And so often it's a purging of everything that the narcissist might be a part of to heal and recover. It might sound really extreme. Often that is the way that it needs to take place. So part of that is recognizing that all of those issues that the empath was trying to resolve will never be resolved. In fact, they don't need to be resolved. They were created in order to control the empath. And so the resolving of them is walking away. The other thing to keep in mind, because there's a reclaiming that needs to take place essentially for the empath of their entire being. And one thing that is helpful to keep in mind through this process is that you were, in a sense, doing the right thing with the wrong person. That with the right person, everything that you were attempting to do would lead to a very lovely, loving, healthy, connected relationship. And so, in a sense, that isn't what you did, in a sense, wasn't the problem. It was who you did it with and for how long you did it with. So coming out of it and moving on with your life, the way in which you were trying to build relationship is often not the problem. Now, if there are children involved, that is a whole sort of different ball game, and makes it a lot harder for somebody to deal with this, and that might require some legal representation and some legal avenues in regards to custody and shared custody and all of that. I won't go into that side of things in this video, just to say that it adds a very real complexity to recovery, but recovery is still possible. So often there are some truths that the empath needs to come to realize in their own self and life, due to the fact that they got themselves into this in the first place. So the question of what was in me, or what's gone on in my own history that would lead me to end up with a person like that going through something like this. And that should send the empath back to their own family of origin, in the sense of what were my attachment relationships like with my parents, what happened or didn't happen in my own childhood that might have set me up to being attracted or attracting this kind of relationship. That can be painful but absolutely necessary to recovery. And in a sense, it's kind of like the blessing in disguise, like the diamond underneath the humongous pile of pain, is that this dynamic, this relationship with the narcissist can reintroduce the empath to themselves, to their deeper self, if you like, that was lost, that led to them getting into this relationship in the first place. So it's like it actually does have a means to an end. It can all have a positive eventually. So in a sense, it can be a ginormous life lesson to bring an empath into a deeper connectedness and relationship with themselves, and from that eventually into their relationships, romantic or friendship or whatever, that it deepens and enriches their lives eventually. It's just a huge price to pay to get there. Now, the reality is that there is life after a relationship with a narcissist, basically because there was life before relationship with the narcissist. The reality is there wasn't life with the narcissist because they were with a narcissist. So a relationship with a narcissist takes away life. It just removes life. And so there can be a sense for people recovering that, will I ever get back on track? Will I ever recover from this? And the reality is yes, because you've got the problem, a huge piece of the problem out of your life, which is the dynamic and relationship with the narcissist. That is what made it impossible to move forward. Without that in your life anymore, everything is available, everything is possible. Life will start to just naturally come back into your life. It is a very slow, can be a very slow process, but life without the narcissist will bring life back and bring meaning back. So part of the process is deciding who you can trust and who you can't trust coming out of a narcissist relationship. And that can be a rude awakening for some people. Some people could find that nearly everybody in their life is somehow being co-opted by the narcissist, and they have to let a lot of people go. Very, very painful. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case. It could be just isolated to a few people. But there's a sense that there's a need to just let go of those that, like, essentially taking the side of the narcissist, if you like, or choosing to see you as the problem and all of that. And in a sense, one just needs to cut their losses and, for the sake of recovery, put solid boundaries in place so that the narcissist has little to no input or way of getting into your life. In that sense, like friendships, bank accounts, social circles, all number of things may need to be addressed, because to the level that you allow the narcissist in or to stay in will be to the level that they will continue to abuse you. So there's a sense of needing to just purge yourself of the narcissist, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And essentially recovery happens in reverse. So you remove yourself physically, get them out of your life, and that essentially sets you up to dealing with the spiritual, mental, and emotional. And that is that can be a slow process as you kind of come to terms with how much they've impacted and affected you emotionally and mentally, and almost like learn to rethink about things. And you'll have thinking patterns that just aren't based in any reality. It was based in their reality. And it's just like life kind of needs to just do its thing for that sort of stuff to emerge. Certain thinking patterns or feelings that you have that were based more around being with the narcissist than anything else. And you start to see that, I don't need to feel this way anymore. Or, you just have to recover from the narcissist impact. It can be very helpful to, almost absolutely necessary, to debrief. It's almost like PTSD, post-traumatic stress, that getting out of it, out of that essentially a traumatic relationship, and seeing the devastation that it's created, could need therapy, but it at least needs somebody safe to talk about what happened, to reframe what happened, to make sense of what happened, to help to clear out this build-up that often the empath has accumulated throughout the relationship, because in a sense the empath carries the issues that were unresolved, and so there is just a huge burden that the empath carries, and talking about it can help to reduce the load, can help to recognize what doesn't need to be carried anymore. And I think there's a huge amount of truth that those issues only existed because the narcissist created them in the first place to control the empath. So in a sense, those issues get resolved simply by walking away from that relationship, because for the most part the empath will not have those same kinds of problems with a healthy person. There'll be normal relationship problems and communication and things like that, but all of that will get resolved with a healthy person. All of that other stuff that went on with the narcissist simply just you won't have those problems in a healthy relationship. So essentially it's giving back all of that junk that was put on the empath, putting that all back on the narcissist, putting it over that side of the street, so to speak, and moving on, and just addressing the reality for the empath. How did I get into this mess? What was my part in this? Where does this come from me? And that's part of the healing process. Another way to recover from all of this is also to read literature on the topic. And that could lead to a range of different areas, but just reading material on narcissism to help normalize your experience, so that you can sort of put that experience in a sense in a compartment, because essentially everything that you experience with a narcissist, you're not likely to experience it anywhere else, so you can sort of put it all in one basket, if you like. And it's helpful to be recognizing in a situation, it's like, okay, that's more of that dynamic, or more of what was going on inside of the narcissist dynamic. I can see what that's about and where that came from, and place it over there. So it's kind of a differentiating between the empath from the narcissist, in a sense that the narcissist has got their hooks inside the empath, and part of the recovery process is recognizing how they have, and that takes time, to purge the empath from the narcissist, because this never occurred. The empath never got inside of the empath's world. It was all an illusion. So it is essentially resolving this kind of picture and removing it. So there's the removing of the person, and then there's the removing of their impact on the empath emotionally and mentally, socially, and essentially spiritually. So I hope you have found this video informative and helpful, either for the viewer who is going through this, or who's been through this, or wants to understand what happens to someone when they go through something like this. There's certainly a lot more that could be said on this topic, but I'll leave it there for today. I appreciate if you'd like the video, if you found it helpful, and please share it with groups or with others you feel might benefit from a video like this. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you're liking the way in which I address topics. And thank you very much for watching to the end, and I'll see you again in another video. And just to let you know that I am a counsellor and an MBTI practitioner, and if you're interested in those services, please check out my website and feel free to send me an email. Happy to correspond with you and possibly set up an appointment time, and I'll see you again in another video.